But let's take some questions. Here's a good question from Faith Wilson. She said, being a single mom, it is hard for me to teach and raise because my daughter, who is about to be 13, has said, I believe in Jesus, but why does he allow evil and suffering? I see she's debating her belief. What would you say to Faith, Natasha?
Yeah, well, she might not actually be debating her belief in Jesus, and this could go either way, which is why it's so important to always ask questions. If your kids express doubts or they're whatever it is they're asking, make sure you understand what they're really asking, because this question could be, I totally believe in Jesus, but I'm just trying to understand, in other words, theologically, even if they're not using that word, how does this all fit together? Why is he allowing, COVID-19 to happen? How? And this is, and I would start by answering that question by saying this is a really big question. It's probably the most difficult thing that Christians have to deal with. And people have talked about this 2,000 years since Jesus was here, and before that, long before that, the problem of evil and suffering. So acknowledging that we don't have all the answers, but that and go on to understand, well, okay, what is it exactly that she's asking about? Is it natural evil in terms of the current coronavirus crisis? Is it more of a moral evil, something that someone has done, where then you would talk about free will? Not to give a full answer right here, but I'm just talking about how to kind of dissect what your child is saying to make sure you're answering the right question. Alternatively, if she says, well, I believe in Jesus, but why is he allowing the suffering? Maybe she is questioning how that relates to his existence. And so then you can ask more of those questions like, well, when you see the evil and suffering around, does it sometimes make you doubt that God exists? And just kind of see how she's processing that. And then that kind of gives you a better way that you can go forward in talking with her.
Yeah, I like that you're basically protecting Faith from, just assuming that her child is debating her belief. She genuinely might just be asking the questions that we face. And, you think about it, that question, why is there suffering and evil in this world? It's almost like who we were originally meant to be is crying out. Why is this? It's as if we could recognize that we're created in the image of God and that something has went awry, something is broken. Because isn't it interesting that we work often with that question from the assumption, well, why is there suffering and evil in the world versus why not? Why isn't there more suffering? Why isn't there more evil? It's almost as if the fact that even when we don't recognize it, we're talking about the fact that, well, because we're created by God and he has an Edenic plan for us ultimately. I don't know about you, Natasha, but I do feel like this is one of these questions that comes up so much. And what do you say for you as a mom? If your kids are asking you, why the COVID-19? So let's talk about, you've got natural evils and moral evils, to your point. Yeah, COVID-19. Mom, why would God allow something like COVID-19? And then you've got moral evils. Somebody is, just torturing a baby for fun, as we often hear put. What kind of replies have you found yourself engaging in with your kids around these issues?
Well, we talk an awful lot about free will in our house and how, the puppy, we talked about Macy at the beginning. Macy has made an amazing opportunity for us to talk about free will. And literally today I was talking about this. And it's become kind of a running joke with us because I keep pointing back to Macy as these examples. And, I said, just like with Macy right now, we don't give her any kind of opportunity. We have to limit her freedom a bit. She can't go running out into the street, right? But she has free will within our house. And so, when God has given us certain limitations as humans that, there are certain things that we can and can't do, but within that, he's given us a lot of freedom. Maisie can use her free will to do things like chew on our carpet, which is driving us all crazy. She can do that, and that's a bad thing. But we also put this boundary of the house around her. And so God has put these limitations around what he is willing to allow and not allow. And do we understand exactly where he's going to draw those boundaries. No, of course not. We don't have the mind of God. We don't possibly have that kind of eternal perspective. But I think that's just such a tangible example for the kids to look at and say, yeah, I get it. We have free will, and people are going to use their free will in some really poor ways. And we've even talked about, okay, from a dog's perspective, is she just like a robot, basically? Is she just like a molecular machine? And if so, is this really a love that she has for us? She
Mm,
comes over and is super excited if we have a treat. And my son, especially, he thinks about this a lot. And he'll, even because we've had this conversation about it, he'll get out the treat and say, Macy, do you want to come and, do you want to eat this? And she comes over and she acts very loving and stuff. He's like, but is it only for the treat? Are you
mm,
just basically a robot? And we draw that parallel, right, with God. And it's okay. Well, if we don't have the free will to choose to love God, is it really any kind of all? My son really
mhm,
wants me to just love him because there's a treat in hand. So there are lots of these little kind of examples that we've used with the dog. But so we've talked about that quite a lot in terms of free will. But as far as the coronavirus, I think it's interesting. It's brought this whole subject of natural evil to light, but nothing has changed. Have we not have been bothered as much in our comfortable culture by these kinds of things, but it's kind of sad that it took this to bring us all kind of to more of awareness of it. And so I start right there with the kids and say, hey, yeah, this is affecting us, but nothing's changed in the world. It's not like we suddenly have reason to question God, whereas we didn't yesterday, because yesterday people were starving in Africa and lots of
mhm,
other places. And so I don't, maybe that's a little different than how other people would approach it, but I like to make sure the kids understand, like, this isn't some giant earth shaking thing that's changed everything. We need to have better perspective on the world to know this is how our world is.
mm,
And we need to understand that this is a long term problem of natural evil that lots of people have written about for thousands of years. And of course, if we go really deep into this, I've talked to my kids about how your answer to that actually depends quite a bit on your view of the age of the earth. And a
mhm,
young earth creationist is going to answer that very differently than someone who believes in an old earth, where viruses and the things that we see were part of God's good creation, whereas most young earth creationists would see it as an outcome of the fall specifically. So sometimes these questions require a little bit more nuance than I think parents dig into, but they're important.